is Jets Final Drive. He is Zack Rosenblatt. I am Connor Hughes, and we have made it back from Indianapolis, the NFL Scouting Combine, the place where the true landscape of what's about to happen for the NFL offseason truly takes place. It was a productive week. It was a wild week trying to get down there. There was news breaking with a trade. The Jets and Breece Hall trying to come to an agreement on a long-term contract extension. We're going to be talking about it all on this episode of JFD, but before we get to that, Zack, how are you doing, my friend?
Well, you were in Indy longer than me, so I'm well rested. I'm raring to go. You were there. You might still be there for all I know. You were there a long time.
I was. We actually. So I was there, and then I flew home at 5 a.m. on Saturday because. Ugh. So like people who know me know that my wife and I have been together since I was in high school. Like that's when we started dating. So her birthday is February 28th. So aside from the COVID year of 2020. I have literally missed her birthday every single year since 2016. Every single year I've missed her birthday. So the way that this combine schedule shaped out, and because the quarterbacks talked on Friday, I was like, wait a minute, I got to be there Friday, but I can definitely come home Saturday in time to actually have the entire day to celebrate her. So it was a lot of fun. I mean, that was a very early flight, and I don't advise anyone getting to an airport that early, but I survived it. And the birthday was fun, and it was worth coming home for. I will say I had to navigate a new parenting landscape that I'm keeping a notebook, Zack, for when you and Sam decide to start having kids, and it's we had the first death in the family where her hermit crab died. 6 months this thing made it, dude. Like we got it off the boardwalk in Wildwood. I thought it was going to be like a 1 or a 2 week thing. 6 months this crab was with us, but unfortunately, R.I.P. We lost Krabby late last night.
R.I.P. Well, should we do a ceremony at the end of the pod for
the salute? What is it like when they fire off the guns? The salute for the military for Krabby. It was funny though, dude, because like I mean this is my first kid. You know, I'm not exactly around them a lot. So like when we realized that Krabby was gone, my daughter feeds him every day, like says hi to him, all that stuff. She finally had to stop touching him because his pinching claw came back. But I said to Bree, what are we supposed to do here? Like how do I tell her that do we just get rid of her? So I crowdsourced our group chat with some other reporters, and that was absolutely no help whatsoever. With Ryan Dunleavy saying just go buy another crab, and then Dan Duggan being like, I just tell my kids no matter what. So I don't do this often. I went to Google Parenting, and they said okay, just sit your kid down and explain. The animal has passed away. It's no longer going to be with us, but it lived a great life, and now its body stopped working. So I was like, all right, I guess I'll do that. So I literally sat Brooke down and I was like, honey, look, I got to talk to you. And she's like processing it. And she goes, can I get a new Krabby? And I'm like, sure, honey, we can get a new Krabby. But then she also had my wife and I on the floor in puddles when she went up and said goodbye to her crab. And she goes, I had fun, Krabby. And I was like, oh my God, we're done. We're toast. But anyway, saying goodbye to hermit crabs aside, this is an action-packed episode of JFD. We did come to you guys at one point during the NFL Combine, and we're now going to recap the entire thing. So we're going to be talking about free agency rumors, draft rumors, what Zack heard, what I heard, Jermaine Johnson, Breece Hall, all of that fun stuff, Zack. But I don't know if we could totally get there without addressing the elephant in the room, and that is Tabletgate with Aaron Glenn, where people thought he fell asleep. I've been told that he was literally looking at his iPad down there. But what is your stance on the latest unique situation in Jets land?
It's impossible unless the camera just stayed on him for the moments leading up to it. It's impossible to actually know because you're obviously going to hear from the Jet side that no, he was not sleeping. And I even heard more specifically he was looking at measurements for, I believe David Bailey was the guy that was about to run, and he was and there was coaches next to him talking about the measurements, and he was looking at those, and then but the part where everybody believed he was sleeping is because it seems just based on the video, it's almost as if someone's you have you on camera, and then he jolts up, and so at the end of the day, number one, I mean, this is more of a LOL Jets type moment at the end of the day. It's not really a big deal because if you think about it, how many coaches were even not even at the combine? Sean McVay might be sleeping on his couch watching the drills for all I know. And I know how late the nights go in Indy. I'm sitting there tired getting on the podcast and stuff that I was doing that week. So even if he was sleeping, who cares? Make fun of the Jets for things they deserve to get made fun of.
But here's my thing with it, and this is the deep answer to what is a pretty funny situation. The Jets don't get the benefit of the doubt. It's
Yeah.
perception and reality don't meet each other in Florham Park, and you can say that's not fair, and it's not fair. I mean, Aaron Glenn has very little to do with the 14 previous years of complete and total ineptitude of this franchise. He's doing everything that he can to turn this team around, but he's going to get looped in with all of the dysfunction that has marred this franchise for the better part of 2 decades. That's just going to happen. So when they see this clip of Glenn and it looks like he's going to be sleeping, the story is, oh, look, LOL, it's the Jets, same old Jets. Their head coach is coming off a 3-win season. Now he's sleeping at the NFL Combine, and it's going to go rampant, and it's going to go viral. And the fact is that I don't know if the truth in the matter, and again, I've been told the same thing you are, Zach, that he was not sleeping, he was looking at his tablet, but the truth I don't think ultimately matters. And it's a similar parallel that I draw to this notion that's out there that ownership is the reason why the Jets had to move on from Tanner Engstrand and why Wink Martindale didn't happen and all these assistants got fired. And Aaron Glenn can sit up there and scream until he's blue in the face and his voice runs out that he made these decisions himself. It doesn't matter because people are going to think that Woody Johnson meddled. People are going to think that the head coach was sleeping. People are going to think that the Jets, whenever there is an opportunity to make a fool of themselves, are going to make a fool of themselves. And that doesn't matter if it's true or it's not. What does is the only way that they fix it. And the Jets realize this. Aaron Glenn realizes this. Everyone in that building realizes it. They just have to start winning some games, dude.
Yeah, and I mean, Aaron Glenn knows it too. He's alluded to this both publicly and privately that, like, until the Jets start winning, like, they're going to get made fun of for everything. And he's a part of that. And, you and I have both said this, like, we've been critical of him for sure. But I also think one thing he deserves credit for is he does have very thick skin. Like, he is not someone who seems to, like, really care what people are saying publicly about him. Like, there might be certain things that frustrate him or whatever. But I do think ultimately, like, the Ask Rich thing is the most famous one, that press conference. Like, he did that. And he did not care how people responded to it or how they were going to respond to it. He was going in there to make his own point, and it was for himself. And he didn't care how how many people were laughing at him. How many reporters thought it was ridiculous, whatever. Like, he is going to be Aaron Glenn, and so there's something to be said about that. And I think it will be more positively received that he has thick skin if they were winning, as we're saying. And so it kind of goes back to, I've said this to a few people. Like, I know Mike Vrabel, but I also know they won every game this year. So his thing in the press conference, like, it seems endearing while it's happening. But, like, I've also seen it in Tennessee with less media where they were losing, where he was a little prickly, and I don't think it went over as well. So, like, it really comes down to winning and losing. It doesn't matter how likable or unlikable you think somebody is. They seem more likable when you're winning somehow, and you seem more unlikable when you're losing somehow. Even look at Mike McDaniel, like the whole Mike McDaniel shtick. Like, people loved it when they were winning 10 games every year. This guy's so quirky, it's funny. All of a sudden they're losing, and they're like, what is wrong with this guy? So it really just comes down to if you win or lose at the end of the day.
It really does. Let's get into some real Combine stuff. But before we get there, Zach, I don't know how much fans totally understand what the Combine is, because I saw something went viral on social media recently because there weren't a lot of media in attendance for the offensive linemen when they spoke towards the end of the week. There were more people there than what that picture indicated, but everyone's like, oh my God, reporters don't care about offensive line, reporters don't care about offensive line. Covering the Combines, it's not like a game. It's not like training camp. I mean, the reasoning why the vast majority of local media, you covering the Jets, me covering the Jets and Giants, are in this attendance, it's not necessarily to see the prospects work out. It's not always to talk to the prospects. If, for example, the Jets say there were 3 or 4 legitimate quarterbacks in this year's class, and you knew the Jets were going to take one of them, you want to be there for when that quarterback speaks, just like we were there when Reese and Bailey spoke this weekend. But for the most part, it's about getting there to hear the coach speak at the podium. It's getting there to hear the general manager speak at the podium. And then it's sourcing and networking. Because the whole thing about the NFL is that during the week of the Combine, the vast majority of coaches, the vast majority of executives, just about every single scout, front office personnel, the people that you work with every single day that you rely on to get information, are in one area at one point of time and basically like a 1.5 mile radius. That's where everybody is. So it's the perfect opportunity to walk down the hallway of the JW Marriott and run into coaches that you've covered before, scouts that you haven't seen in a while. I ran into an executive that I had a great night with, like just cracking up, talking about golf 3 years ago, and was like, oh my God, we caught up. And I was like, dude, see you again in 3 years. Like that's what this is. It's a huge sourcing opportunity. So it's how we go there for a week and then we come back with intel, and it's how we can kind of figure out what the landscape is, because everybody who is there that's going to dictate those things are there and talking to people. And luckily, the more people you know, the more intel you're able to get. But in the spirit of the non-football conversation here, Zach, what was your favorite non-football part of the NFL Combine this year before we get into the nitty-gritty? And we're going to start with the Jermaine Johnson trade.
My favorite non-football part. I
Yeah.
mean, honestly, it's my favorite part was this restaurant I went to that everybody's been telling me to go to in Indianapolis. Honestly,
The Mexican one?
A real big. No, there's a spot called Bluebeard. It's like this famous spot in town. They like changed their menu up. It's like farm to table or whatever. There was a bunch of NFL people there. I went with Daniel Popper and our boy Michael Dunn. It was one of the better meals I've had in Indy. It was phenomenal. Great pasta, great burrata, great. We had a great steak, great drinks. Just a phenomenal restaurant. So if you're ever in Indy, I highly recommend it. Bluebeard.
I am going to go very similar on the food route. The cliche thing that everyone's going to tell you to go in Indianapolis is St. Elmo's, which is it's a fine steakhouse. It's fine, but like their claim to fame is this shrimp cocktail, which is just really like loaded with horseradish in the cocktail sauce. That's all the St. Elmo's thing is. So I actually avoided St. Elmo's this entire trip. I did not go into Kilroy's this entire trip. I did not one step foot in Prime this entire trip. Did go to Cafe Patachou, which is elite and top notch. I did have one lunch with an agent at Harry and Izzy's, which is like the sister restaurant of Prime, but I like Harry and Izzy's because they have fried green tomatoes. That always slaps. The two best meals that I had there, dude, and the highlights of Indy is one, that Mexican place that you took me to the very first night that is kind of like off the beaten path a little bit. Elite. And then they just built, I'm not a huge steakhouse guy, but I met up with a coach for my final night at Dean's, the steakhouse and the JW. They just built it there. My last hurrah before I went home after my week in Indy, I met up with a coach there, and it was and is unbelievable. Like one of the best steaks I've had in a good long while. So, it's a little pricey at times, but it was 100% worth the trip. I mean, it was delicious. So if you guys are in Indianapolis for any reason, what was the Mexican place you took me to, Zach? What was the name of it?
It was called Livery, Livery.
Livery.
But I just thought of another fun thing that happened to me when I was in Indy. I was at one of the main bars that everybody camps out at one night, and I look up and I see Andre Drummond walking through, and that's when I realized he was out the night before a game. By the way, and that's when I realized the Sixers were in town. So I went and saw the game with Dave Zangaro, who covers the Eagles, and then the next morning at Cafe Patachou, I saw Klay Thompson just sitting alone at Cafe Patachou. I had to double take a few times. I'm like, what is it? That's Indy though. Like everything is in one area. So when the NBA teams are in town, they're all going to the same places as all the NFL people. So you have a Klay Thompson at one table, you have an NFL head coach in the corner, you have a GM in the corner. Like it's a fun week for that stuff. Like you just walk around and you're going to see somebody probably. And
that's why like people say like should it stay in Indianapolis, should it not stay in Indianapolis? I am now gearing much more towards staying in Indianapolis. I was team go to LA just because I wanted to go to LA. The Indianapolis thing is very convenient. I mean, we're both very blessed that we've done this long enough now. We're going to the Indianapolis where it used to be like 90% hoping you meet people, 10% reconnecting. It's kind of flipped on its head. Like 90% is reconnecting with all the coach and the agents and all that stuff that you know, and then 10% is meeting new people. I'm a fan of Indy because you truly can like walk down the hall anywhere and see somebody that you know that you haven't seen in a while. I mean, I ran into Joe Vitt, who used to be the Jets linebackers coach, Adam Gase's father-in-law. Ran into him. Haven't seen him in a minute or two. Actually got lunch with Adam Gase. He's doing well. I'm very happy that he's in LA and seems like he's in a really good head spot. But transitioning here a little bit, Zach, to something more Jets related, other than past Jets like Vitt and Gase. Jermaine Johnson has been traded. This happened, I think, the day after we recorded our broadcast. I had heard during the Combine, and this is one where, like, the internet, I don't know how many people care about this. Like, you get the little news and nuggets, and you're holding it and, like, trying to get more intel, and then all of a sudden the next day it breaks. So I don't think this was a complete and total surprise that Jermaine Johnson was dealt. I think how quick it came together from when they started talking at the NFL Combine to boom, the trade happened at the NFL Combine was a little surprising. But this was a situation where it is as blatant and as black and white as this. The Jets are going to be a multiple defense, but at the heart of it, it's going to be a 34 defense and a 34 scheme. Jermaine Johnson is not a 34 outside linebacker. He's a bigger-bodied, edge-setting defensive end in a 43 scheme. The Jets, I am told, had zero inclination, and there was a zero chance quote that the Jets were going to re-sign Jermaine Johnson. While they did have an opportunity to trade him for a third-round pick to the 49ers at the deadline, last year, they chose to hold out for a second-round pick. Again, they didn't know if they're going to be running a 43 this year or not. Once they made the decision to go 34, it was a fish out of water. Let's just get whatever we could for him. They did not have any offers for third-round picks, did not have any offers for fourth-round picks. So they found an opportunity here to kind of have an out-of-place guy with old friend Robert Saleh in Tennessee to an out-of-place guy here with Jermaine Johnson. They got T'Vondre Sweat in here. He's going to be their big-bodied nose tackle, and Jermaine Johnson goes back to a scheme that he was once a Pro Bowler with Aaron Whitecott and Robert Saleh.
Yeah, and I think it's a trade that makes sense for both sides. Like you said, there wasn't really any interest in him outside of Tennessee, and that was always a destination that made sense. I think it's fair to retroactively maybe look back and be like, I think we even talked about this if you go back and look at our old podcast, like, are they going to regret not accepting a third-round pick for Jermaine Johnson? And I think there's an argument to be made that they maybe regret it a little bit, but at the end of the day, like you said, they didn't know they were going to be switching their schemes. They didn't even know they were going to be firing Steve Wilkes at the time. They didn't know Aaron Glenn was going to be taking over and that they'd be going to more 3-4. So this trade just makes sense for both sides in that, like you said, you get rid of a player who you were not going to sign next year anyway, so you get an asset for him now as opposed to losing him for nothing later. You clear that cap off your books. Not like you needed it, but you clear that cap. And T'Vondre Sweat, he fills a need. He's a young ascending player on a very cheap contract over the next 2 years, and the Jets believe in their ability with their new coaching staff to develop a guy like that. And so he's someone worth investing in, whether you, there's obviously some questions about, Wade and
yeah, I'm going to be a little more negative than you.
Well, I just think there's a ceiling there, and so if the Jets think they could get him to be where he needs to be and all that stuff, like he played really well when he played last year. If you look at the 400 snaps he played, he was one of the best run stoppers in the NFL among defensive tackles. Like that is absolutely true, and so that's something worth going for. If you don't think Jermaine's a part of your future, I get it. I would have liked to get a draft pick in a trade for Jermaine as well, but I understand the logic here at least.
Here's the only thing with T'Vondre Sweat, and when he's on the field, he's a dominant player. I mean, he is a big-bodied, nasty, true nose tackle that is not only going to be a space-eating run stuffer, but does have some ability to rush the passer. Like he that is in him. He's not a one-trick pony. Like he can do both. He's not a complete and total liability if he's out there when somebody drops back. The problem, and this is from talking to sources in Tennessee now, and then those that actually coached him previously. So the old Tennessee Titans staff. There's a reason that this team gave up on him in spite of the fact they're going from 34 to 43, because you could still have found a role for Sweat on their defense when he's got the 2 years of team control, is not overly expensive, can stop the run and still has some pass rush ability. And it's that weight is a major issue, because at times last year he ballooned close to 400 pounds, I was told. There are some questions with effort. There's some questions with practice habits. And there's a big concern on how much he actually loves the game. And that's where and why you're giving up on a player that clearly has talent. Now, the thought process here with the Jets, and they are very high on this kid. Like they don't view this as a consolation prize. I actually loop it in similar to when they got A.D. Mitchell or when they got Jarvis Brownlee, guys that a lot of the people are like, oh, these are cast-offs. Yeah, they have talent. And the Jets viewed them as, no, we can turn them into something. Our culture can turn them into something. Aaron Glenn wanted this guy. Darren Muji wanted this guy. And the thought is that you put him around Dunbar, who's been around the block a few times, worked with a ton of people, has gotten elite level play out of a lot of different defensive linemen, and you can have something really special here in Sweat. At worst case, it's worth the risk for a guy that is absolutely going to fit your scheme, giving up a guy that was just not going to.
Yeah, and that's what it comes down to. And while edge rusher is an even bigger need now, this also makes you pretty solid at defensive tackle now, because or defensive line, I should say, if they're going 3-4, because you have Jawan Briggs, who I think is an ascending player. You have Harrison Phillips, a solid run stopper, and then you have a pure nose tackle in DeFondre Sweat. You could probably still get a pure pass rusher out of that, like if you want to add one in the draft or something, but defensive tackle doesn't need to be a priority in free agency. Now you could focus on getting pass rushers, getting a safety, getting a linebacker, and like the other parts of the defense that are kind of holes.
You want to take some fan questions before we move on to talking about free agency?
Yeah, sure.
All right, let's do that. I was about to tweet this out too, and then I totally lost my group chat. So Twitter does this weird thing where like it'll automatically lose your link, and that kind of stinks because I'm trying to do this. All right, so fan questions. I like this, by the way. I thought you were supposed to do fan questions, but apparently it's not back with me. This is Boomer said, or I'm sorry, this is JetFan1997 says that Boomer said, which I did see the clip on WFAN, that Ty Simpson had an impressive interview with the Jets. Hard, obviously, not to believe he's getting that from Florham Park because of Boomer's relationship with Frank Reich. I actually met Frank Reich, nice guy. Met him, talk about walking in the hallway, literally just walking to the Starbucks and saw Frank Reich in the hallway and Frank Reich in the hallway and went up and introduced myself. Have you, and this is off of this one here, have you improved your stance at all in thinking that Simpson would be a good pick for the Jets there with 60? And I know I have a strong take on this one. I'm just curious if you are now more in the boat after some good things that we've heard from Simpson, both with his measurables and how he's interviewing with people compared to where he was. Maybe like, are you warming up to the idea of him being the pick at 16?
No, I'm in the same place I was. I'm not surprised he interviewed well. He's a coach's son. Like, he is somebody who I think the personality was never a concern with him. The question, and this is a question around the league, like I've heard about a few different teams who like don't want to draft him in the first round at all because of his lack of experience. 15 starts does not portend to success in the NFL generally. I am highly intrigued by him as a project, whether it's 33, if you can get about 44, I think that's best case scenario. But I'm not using my 16th pick with him. I'd maybe consider if you want to trade back to the end of the first round, like from 33 and bump up a few picks, like, and you really like him, and then you get the fifth-year option, like maybe. But I'm just not someone who's going to invest in a guy who has such little experience, even if he has some tools, he has the IQ, and he showed some flashes last year, but the end of the season was bad, and he just does not have the experience that you want.
I'm right there with you, man. The Jets are not in a position with how many positions that they need to take a player 16 who's not going to see the field. And I know that I know that it's risky to say draft for need over best player available. That's not what we're talking about here. I mean, we can go into this offseason, Zach, and find 10 to 12 positions where the Jets could use a new starter. And of those 10 to 12 positions, yes, quarterback is one of them, but of those 10 to 12 positions, they're going to need 2 or 3 legitimate playmakers, dudes, dogs, stars of that grouping. For Aaron Glenn and Darren Muji, who are going to need to show something this year to justify getting a third year from Woody Johnson, they can't afford their second overall pick to sit behind somebody. They can't afford 16 to sit behind somebody. They can't afford any of these other selections within that first 100 to sit behind people. They need that number 2 pick to be on the field contributing, and same with 16. So I do like the idea of potentially grabbing somebody on a day 2 pick or a day 3 pick to sit behind if you accomplish some other things, or depending on what you're able to do in free agency. And we're going to talk about this in a few minutes here, Zach. Where the Jets are and the perception people have of the Jets, there's going to be a Jets tax that they have to pay in the offseason. They are not going to be free agents that are lining up to kick down the door here and play for this team. They're going to have to pay more to convince them to come here. So knowing that is probably going to take them out of the running for some of the better players in a weak free agent class. They need these guys that they pick in April to contribute and contribute early. And I don't think that Ty Simpson in any way, shape, or form should be starting in September for any team. All right, one more question here, Zach. This is from Garden State Hemp 1733, which is a good little transition here because we're going to be talking about free agency here in a minute. Marshawn Lattimore is going to be released by the Commanders. Would he be somebody that you would be interested in seeing in New York as an option opposite Brandon Stevens, potentially to compete there with A.C. Thomas?
I mean, I would, if he's fully healthy, maybe, but he was pretty bad for the Commanders last year. The Saints basically dumped him for very little, and the Commanders are cutting him because he's not Marshawn Lattimore anymore. the connection is that Aaron Glenn coached him in New Orleans, and they have a good relationship. And I do think they're going to bring in. We'll probably talk about that later in the show. They're going to bring in a bunch of guys, or try to, with ties to Aaron Glenn. But I just don't see him as a guy that in that cornerback room. If you're going to bring somebody else in, it needs to be somebody that you feel a little bit better about than Lattimore. Like, I'm not going to give it a 0% chance, but I just don't see that happening.
There are some issues there in Washington, man. There were injury concerns, soft tissue stuff that started popping up, and usually when you see that, it's the beginning of the end. Didn't play particularly well against high-level competition. Is certainly not the player that he was with Aaron Glenn. And I know that Glenn likes reclamation projects. I know that he believes he can get more out of guys than other people, but this is probably one that I would steer clear of. I don't think honestly, dude, even if it's on a team-friendly deal, even if it's on a number that makes sense, I don't think it's something that I'd be super inclined to go with. I think we're probably in the same boat there.
Yep, agreed.
All right, so free agency talk. You want to talk about free agency?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. Move on here a little bit. All right, so the unfortunate thing for the Jets right now, and it's a problem that they've dealt with for a while, except for the year that they had Aaron Rodgers, is that you're just not going to have teams that want to play for this team right now, or not going to have players that want to play for this team right now. I shouldn't say none, but your top tier guys who are going to have other options, those players are going to likely go elsewhere than New York, because they're not going to get the benefit of the doubt with taxes, obviously. They're not going to get the benefit of the doubt with the coaching staff, because you can be a scheme fit player who's coming here to play with Aaron Glenn, and if you don't win, you got a brand new coach that might want you cut next year. And also, there's no quarterback. I mean, the main things that draw a player to a specific destination is really that. It's scheme fit, stability, chance to win, and quarterback. And the Jets have none of those things, and they can't promise any of those things. So they're going to have to convince guys to come to New York based on their wallet. And from my understanding, Woody Johnson is willing to spend this offseason, and Woody Johnson is going to spend this offseason. This just isn't a particularly great class to spend. And I actually went to Indianapolis with the goal of figuring out why. Like, why does this free agent class seem so poor? Because it does. It is not a very good class. And I talked to agents who told me that, look, you're right, and because of that, you're going to see an abundance of 2-year deals. Now, there are players at the top of the market. Like Tyler Linderbaum, I was told by somebody who was actually negotiating with his agency that the starting price begins with a 2 for him annually per Y. So at least $20 million per year, and it's already exceeding that for a center, which is crazy. John Franklin Myers is a super robust market. He's looking at about $20 million annually. I mean, there are some very, very good free agents out there, but there aren't that many, and it's for 2 reasons. One, the increasing salary cap, which is now over $300 million, has afforded teams the opportunity where if they want to keep a guy, they can keep him. Period. Like there is no world anymore, usually, where a team is like so cap strapped that they have to let somebody that they love go, or somebody's definitely going to walk. There are so many means to keep that person in their building that you can keep that person in your building. That's actually has general managers and coaches looking at the players that are available and saying, oh my God, not, oh my God, let's go get this guy, but wait a minute, why is this guy here? And 2, this is the 2022 draft class, which had some good players at the beginning. That was actually like the Sauce Garrett. But aside from the players that got extended, there really wasn't that great of a class. It wasn't. That's where you had Kayvon early, Evan Neal early. Like, there really weren't that many great players in the 2022 class, which is now this year's free agency, which is kind of the 2 big reasons why.
Yeah, and look, I think Darren Muji thinks, and I think this is the right way to think, that you don't build your team through free agency. So I think every year Jets fans want the Jets to go after the top guy. You know, this year it's Alec Pierce at receiver. It's Tyler Linderbaum at center. In the past, it's been similar
Quick
guys.
on Pierce. Can I say something real quick on Pierce now that you said his name? Real quick?
Sure.
I heard he's $25 million a year. Is what
it
he's
might be
looking
more
at
than that,
now.
actually.
Yeah, that was minimum.
Yeah,
like, that was a minimum of $25 million
no,
a year.
And that's kind of the point I was
20.
That's the point I was about to get at, is that
oh, sorry.
when you're in that point was good, but the specific point of, like, when you're in free agency, you have to overpay to get guys, especially the ones on the top market. That's why you have something like the Giants paying Kenny Golladay a while back, one of the worst contracts ever, bid against themselves, but they paid him like $20 million a year, and that's because you're trying to fill a need in free agency with a guy that you perceive as the best guy available, and so you're going to overpay him. I don't think Muji operates like that. So I think what you're going to find is not quite like last year, where they were doing a lot of guys that we really hadn't heard that much about before, or, you know, guys who were young and on the up and coming. I do think they're going to target veterans, target leadership, target ties to Glenn, but they're going to be hovering in the middle of the market. That's where you go for a guy like Alex Anzalone. That's where you go for a guy like Al-Khani Muhammad from the Lions, or the safety class. Safeties generally don't get huge contracts, so that's where I think they're going to go. They're going to go in that little middle. You get some veterans. You try and get some guys that are, I think the best free agents are the ones that kind of like John Simpson from a few years ago, a guy that's like 27, some room to grow, but he hasn't shown quite enough to get a huge contract. Like that's the best place to shop in free agency, because then you get some value. So I think Darren Muji's smart. I think everything he does has some logic to it. You might not agree with some of the moves they've made, but there was logic to signing Justin Fields. There was logic to, banking on Brandon Stevens being better. There was logic to investing in Jamie and Sherwood now, like things like that. So I just think they're going to operate in terms of logic at all times. And so I wouldn't expect them to go for Tyler Linderbaum or Alec Pierce or the guys at the very top, but the middle tier is where they're going to live.
I could see them try for Pierce because it makes sense, because he's young, he's good, he does something that Garrett Wilson doesn't. The problem is what we just said. Like, why would Pierce choose the Jets over somebody else when he's going to have an opportunity, if he even leaves Indianapolis? But there's going to be legitimate contending teams, whether it's the Bills or the Chiefs or teams that like have the star quarterback in place that want him, that have the stable coaching staff in place that want him. They're going to pay as much because of how the salary cap has increased, they're going to be able to pay as much as the Jets want because they can always free up money to do other things with void years and stuff like that. So it's hard to truly outbid a team when you don't have some other variable that is drawing you to a destination. And unfortunately for the Jets right now, they don't. So I completely agree with you, Zach. I think you're going to see them focus primarily on leadership, on veterans, guys with ties to Aaron Glenn who can help continue to carry his message out throughout the locker room. Because what Harrison Phillips said when he called basically the culture of the Jets a cancer, I mean, that's a damning indictment of this team, especially when culture is supposed to be what Aaron Glenn believes he can carry forth. And I still believe that one of the most surprising things from last year was that Glenn did not bring many of his guys into the locker room. Like, he didn't. There was no one there who knows how he wants to do it, who was going to do it the way that he, or show it and see it and be his leader and carry his voice throughout the team when he's not necessarily there himself. And I think you'll see guys added now that will do that. Demario Davis, I know, has been one that's rumored to them. I could see that happening. Anzalone, I think, is almost a short, well, I don't want to say that because that's going to get aggregated. Like, just the way that makes so much sense where the Jets need the position. He's good with Aaron Glenn, a little bit older veteran. I mean, that makes so much sense for them to pursue him. But is there anyone else on your mind real quick before we move on to talk a little Breece about who the Jets could target?
Yeah, I had a column that came out today of things I heard in Indy. Safety is a position that I think they are. Yeah, safety is a position they're going to target in free agency. The couple of names I had in there were Cameron Curl from the Rams and Brian Cook from the Chiefs. I do think if Minkah Fitzpatrick's available from the Dolphins, that's someone to keep an eye on, because you have Brian Duker and Ryan Slowick both from that staff, and Fitzpatrick is like 31 now, but he's a playmaker, and they need those. So, and I can't imagine that would cost a lot, like even in a trade. So I'd be intrigued by him. Those were kind of the names that came to mind. All
right. Moving on here a little bit, let's talk about the guy I think that's on just about every Jet fan's mind. It's Breece Hall. And it's great, dude. It is pretty wild how things have shifted with this dude, considering where we were, I would say, training camp and even before Braylon Allen went down, where it was like 100%. The Jets are trading this dude. They're going to roll forward with Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis, and everything's going to be fine, to the point where now this offseason, it's like no matter what, this dude's coming back. Like, he is an untouchable. In fact, when they traded Jermaine Johnson, I talked to two other teams that had been in negotiations with the Jets and spoke with them, and they were led to believe that anybody that was not acquired by Aaron Glenn and Darren Muji could be had. Like, they were available and they could be had. That doesn't mean it's a fire sale, it just means they're trading them. But as we saw with Sauce Gardner, everybody has a price, and they would be willing to listen to anyone on the roster, with the exception of Garrett Wilson, obviously. And the other one I was told was Breece Hall. So from my understanding, and this is the last that I heard, and the last time I checked in on this was literally yesterday, is that the Jets are actively negotiating with Breece Hall's representatives. They prefer a long-term contract extension, long-term in parentheses, about a 3-year deal. They prefer a contract extension over a transition tag. That's what they prefer, which makes sense because you can maneuver the money around, you can change how the cap hit lies, you can put things to year 3, which then would allow you to get cut. The thing that the two sides right now are negotiating with Nicole Lynn, which is Hall's representative, and then obviously Darren Muji and the Jets and their financial team, is the figure. That's the number, because the Jets have made it clear, Zach, that if they don't sign Hall, they're going to transition tag him. that immediately sets the per year value for any Hall contract at that transition tag, which is $11.4 million. Am I right? Is what the transition tag is? We were talking about this earlier today. That's where negotiating starts, at $11.4 million per year. If you're Breece Hall, you want something at $14, $15 million a year at the franchise tag or a little bit higher. So you have to find that middle ground. And are the Jets trying to lowball them and play cheap, knowing that they kind of have control over Breece Hall, and odds are he's not going to want to play on any tag because of the risk of injury? Then if you're Hall, how much gamble do you want to take? It worked out for Saquon Barkley. Could it work out for you? Ultimately, though, I think most people around the league believe that something's going to get done here before the regular season to not have Hall playing on the tag. It doesn't mean it won't be tagged originally, but they'll eventually figure something out.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think Breece would like to hit the open market, but the Jets are not going to give him the opportunity to do that. And so that's why, like you were saying, like I think the Jets are trying to get the number in between the transition and franchise tag, which would be around like 12 or 13 million, would make Breece one of the 5 or 6 highest paid running backs. You'd think they would want to take that, but this is a negotiation, and I think that the Hall side wants more in the franchise tag or more. Because they view him as, whatever, whether it's a Saquon or a little bit below that. I'm not saying I believe that, but I'm saying they enter negotiations saying, well, if we hit the market, we think teams are going to view him as the chance to bring in their next Saquon Barkley. And the Jets can be like, that's not going to happen. And they could be like, okay, we're going to tag you and we can figure this out later. And I think that's what's going to ultimately happen. I mean, by the time people listen to this pod, they might have already announced the tag or they might have already announced a new contract. My guess would be that it lands on the tag tomorrow. That does not mean they won't agree to a contract at a later date. That might even be before free agency, but it gives you more time to negotiate, as opposed to if you don't get this tag done by tomorrow and you hit free agency next week, then the Jets have no choice but to let him hit free agency, and they just cannot afford to do that if their goal is to bring him back. And so, we haven't heard from Breece outside of that interview he did with the New York Post where he kind of was like wishy-washy about what he wants, and he's kind of been wishy-washy about what he wants for the last year. But I think he'll be a Jet at the end of the day, and the contract will probably be structured in a way like they did it with Sauce Gardner and a little bit less, but with Garrett Wilson, to where they can sign him and still trade him without feeling like it's going to kill them cap-wise. And so that's that. I think Muji likes to operate from a point of strength, and that's why you saw that Sauce contract. Sauce is really focused on being the number one highest paid corner in average per year, which is a real misnomer and kind of not the way I would approach it, and that's why it made it very easy to trade him, because they didn't wind up really taking on much dead cap.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what Muji's probably trying to do, and I imagine the Nicole Lynn side is probably trying to get as much of the contract guaranteed as possible, and that's probably why there hasn't been an agreement yet.
Yeah, I would say that Nicole is one of the best agents out there, and that
sure.
What made the Sauce Gardner trade maneuverable and so easy to get out of so early, that I dotting and T crossing that the Jets were able to kind of skirt on through and make it so that it was a very, very team friendly deal. That's not going to fly with Nicole. Like this contract, she is going to fight for her client, and she's had Breece for a while, and she's going to do everything she can to get what she wants. Now, I talked to a team that is in the running back market and making a strong push to dabble in the top end of the market, and they were the ones that told me, like, yeah, if Breece was available, we'd be all over it, but the problem is that Breece isn't available. Like, we all know that he's either getting tagged or extended. Like, that's not going to happen. The value of the contract that they were going to be willing to pursue Hall at was at about $12.5 million. That's where they were. So that's another team that's in the market for a running back. They're all over Kenneth Walker. They would have been on Hall if he was there. The number for them was 12.5. And what they actually told me was that they believed there are bugaboos in Hall's game. They said that he tends to run soft. There's the injury concerns. There's some worry. Well, what kind of running back is he going to look like after he gets paid? But they said that they believed he was a better player than Kenneth Walker. And they thought that he had more upside because of his home run ability. Walker is a little bit tougher of a runner, but that home run ability and Hall is a better receiver. They actually had him above that, but their number for him was 12.5. That's what they were looking at. So we'll see. We'll see what the Jets end up getting done here, or if Hall plays on the tag. But the one thing that somebody did tell me, because I posed this to him, again, he's been doing this for a very long time, and his team is pursuing a running back, is I said, I was like, if you're Breece, do you bank on yourself? Say the Jets say, look, $12.5 million is the best that we can do. We are not giving you a penny more than $12.5 million. would you accept that, or would you hold it out and play on the tag, knowing that you play really well and in 2027 you could get 14 or 15 or 16 million dollars annually? Like, could you potentially get there? And he said, he goes, that risk is just not worth Hall taking. Like, again, he's not Hall's representative, but he's somebody that is in this market for running backs. He said he could not foresee Hall standing 10 toes that deep to be like, I'm playing on this tag, because you could be thinking 15, 16 million dollars next year, one knee injury, one Achilles injury, one season ender, and suddenly that number is cut in half, and you're looking at $7 or $8 million next year. So I think that ultimately something will get done between Breece and the Jets, because he's not going to want to play on a tag.
Yeah, agree. I mean, ultimately, these things always come down to who has the leverage, and as we stare at free agency in the face, like the Jets in theory have, or Breece Hall in theory does, but I think as you move on and he has the tag, and he doesn't have the option of going anywhere else, and he has to wonder if it's worth the risk of playing on the tag or not, then the Jets have the leverage, and then it becomes interesting to see how they structure the contract. Maybe Breece says, okay, if we're going to do this, I want a 2-year deal so I get to free agency quicker, but I also am getting 2 years of money, or I want a 3-year deal. I'm guessing the Jets would like a 3-year deal because that's better for the team. So I'm curious to see what the final contract looks like, the guarantees, the average per year. But at the end of the day, I do think, and the sense I get from talking to people is that there seems to be some level of confidence that the two sides will get something done. And my guess it would land around something like $12 million a year with pretty good guarantees.
There we go. I'm with agreement. Last thing we want to do here is, Zach, you want to talk a little quarterbacks? You want to do a little quarterback talk as usual? I love that I saw throughout the Combine this week, people were like, the Jets are, the typical reports that always come out around Combine time. The Jets are all in on so-and-so. The Jets want this guy. The Jets are going to get Malik Willis. From everybody that I have spoken to, I don't think the Jets have finalized who they want for quarterback yet. And that's not totally uncommon. Like, I was talking to another team who said they have their meetings to gather. What they do is they gather their intel throughout the NFL Combine of, this is the running back market, which we know we're going to play in. This is what this guy's looking for. This is what this guy's blah, blah, blah. Get a general outline of contracts. And then on Monday, today, is when they go, okay, who are we going to pursue and who are we going to do everything we can to get? The Jets really only finalizing their offensive staff a week or so ago, or a couple weeks ago. I mean, they're probably behind the 8 ball a little bit in terms of determining exactly what they want at quarterback. So I genuinely believe that everything is on the table. But the one name that does, maybe it's speculative, maybe it's because it hasn't been shot down like the Kirk Cousins thing, that Kyler Murray name, not via trade, but if he's cut by the Cardinals and the Jets can get him for, say, like $1.5 million, that's around a lot more than I expected it to be. And you and I have talked about this, Zach, and we can get into the nitty-gritty of it. He, from everything that I've heard about this guy, is not the quarterback that you want. In fact, one person who coached Murray in Arizona told me, quote, it would be a disaster, unquote. I mean, there are work ethic concerns with Kyler Murray. There is desirability concerns with Kyler Murray. That stuff and that talk about him not watching film because he's playing Call of Duty, I was told by 2 different teams, including one coach in Arizona, that that's true. Like, that's not a fake thing. Like, that is a true thing that happened. And as one former coach said to me, quote, he's just not a leader, unquote, and players just don't follow him. So for when you're trying to bring in this culture that Aaron Glenn keeps talking about, and this feeling that Aaron Glenn keeps talking about, and this want and desire that Aaron Glenn keeps talking about, I don't see Murray in any way, shape, or form as being a long-term fit for New York, with one caveat. One, we know that Glenn is close with Kyler Murray's dad, so maybe he believes that things can be different with New York because he has some insight that we don't necessarily have. And 2, if the goal is competence, and the goal is some form of excitement, and the goal is trying to get to 6 or 7 wins, the belief is that is something that Kyler Murray can do, because there is arm talent, there is mobility, there is excitement. When he's on the field, he can run around and make plays happen that other people can't, because he is one of the most physically gifted quarterbacks in the league. It's just a matter of, like, is everything you're trying to build worth a quarterback that, from everything I've heard, is exactly against that?
Yeah, look, so what I would say is a lot of what you just said is absolutely true. I think that Aaron Glenn believes in doing his own research and digging into Kyler Murray and whoever the quarterback might be. I think they're doing, as you talked about at the beginning of this point, Like they're doing their research, they're doing due diligence, and that's kind of the root of this. Is they are doing their due diligence in the Kyler Murray. That is absolutely happening, and I think that Aaron Glenn believes that he can bring in just about anybody and make things work if they have the work ethic and the talent and all that stuff. And I know there are questions about Kyler's work ethic, but there's also the idea that maybe he'd be motivated to prove everybody wrong after how the last couple of years have went. And I think that if you look at this quarterback market, there's not a lot of high ceiling quarterbacks. And I'm not saying he has a significantly high ceiling, but he is somebody that has a provable history of production and success in his NFL career. Whereas a lot of these guys, like Malik Willis, is someone that I personally would invest in because I think he has really, really interesting potential, and he has a really strong arm, and he's really athletic, and it sounds like his work ethic is really high level. But, the Jets would probably have to pay $25 to $30 million for a guy that has not proven an ability to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. You have Kirk Cousins, 38 years old. I don't think that's happening. I know we're going to get into all the specific candidates and all that stuff. But if the goal for the Jets is to get the best possible quarterback, then there is a case to be made that it is Kyler Murray. And I'm not saying I believe he's the right option or anything like that, but I think these are the conversations the Jets are having right now. And not only do I think that, I know that those are the conversations they're having right now. And there's two sides of this. Like, there's a lot of things you can point to, be like, it doesn't make any sense. Aaron Glenn has said he doesn't want a celebrity quarterback. Well, I think that was more like he doesn't want Aaron Rodgers than he doesn't want a Kyler Murray. Yeah. There's a lot of people saying, well, Frank Reich has a history of, the quarterbacks are 6'5" and they're pocket passers and things like that. Like, I think Frank Reich throughout his history has kind of just been working with what was handed to him. Like, if you look at Indy, it was like 38-year-olds every year at the end of their career. When he gets to Carolina, Bryce Young was 6 feet tall. I know there was a lot of stuff about how he wanted C.J. Stroud or whatever. He kind of denied that in a story in The Athletic a couple weeks ago. I think they're all very open to just trying to get the best quarterback in there. And so let's say you get Kyler Murray, that doesn't restrict you from adding other quarterbacks too. And that's where somebody like an Andy Dalton, who has ties to Frank Reich, and he's bigger and he knows the offense that he's trying to run, or whether it's whatever. There's a bunch of veteran quarterbacks they could add as another backup, and there's rookies in this class they can add that Frank can develop. I think Aaron Glenn wants to add the best possible quarterback at the end of the day. And he might believe that is Kyler Murray, and that's why my biggest takeaway coming out of the combine is not like, oh, Kyler Murray is the favorite. You should actually absolutely predict Kyler Murray. I came out of the combine thinking that he is a candidate for the job, whereas maybe I don't know that I went into the combine thinking that. And I think that's maybe what's being mistaken a little bit by like what you and I and others have reported. It's more that he is a possibility, so stop trying to rule him out as a possibility.
Correct. And that's, I went to the combine fully expecting the opposite. When I went to Indianapolis, I wholeheartedly felt that I was going to have 10 different people telling me, absolutely not, this is not happening. And instead it was the opposite. And maybe this is strictly because the Jets have not finalized or had not finalized at the time what they wanted at quarterback, but he's not an option. And that's a surprise. He wouldn't be for me at all, but he is not an option. And you touched upon this quickly, Zach, and I do think this is what the Jets are going to do. And it's crazy because when the Giants did it a year ago, it was like, oh my God, this was so dumb. Why would they ever do this? And it actually worked out really reasonably well for them. Not really well, but worked out reasonably well for them. Was that they signed Russell Wilson, they signed Jameis Winston, and then they went and they drafted Jackson Dart as the developmental project. I don't think the Jets go the first round route with that option like the Giants did with Jackson Dart, but I absolutely could see them bringing in a Kyler Murray on a dirt cheap 1.5 veteran minimum deal because of how much money he's getting from the Cardinals, then adding somebody like an Andy Dalton or a proven veteran, even keeping Tyrod Taylor in the building, and then later on in the draft, taking your developmental project in someone like a Drew Allar. And then you go into the offseason and you go into this season with 3 legitimate options that you feel kind of okay with. Both the guy that's sort of like the maybe we can get something out of him in Kyler Murray, the person that you know what you have in Tyrod Taylor, and then your project player in the quarterback. And if it all fails, well, then guess what? You've got a ton of draft picks in 2027 and a much more talent-rich quarterback class to try to get somebody there. Were there other guys, though, Zach, that you thought about? I know that the trade market's going to be an interesting one because that's where Tanner McKee, who does, we were talking about what fits a Frank Reich quarterback. That's Tanner McKee. Yeah. So Tanner McKee could be there. We'll see if the Cardinals make Jacoby Brissett available, if they end up going the Jimmy Garoppolo route. But anyone out, Mac Jones, obviously another one over there in San Francisco. The problem, like you wrote this in your story, the problem is those guys aren't going to be cheap. The teams that have them realize the value that they bring, and they're going to, if you want them, you're going to have to pay.
it's a buyer's market right now. These teams know that there's not a lot of good options out there and that people are desperate. And so you have to really decide, are you willing to give up, the value I've heard for Tanner McKee is third round pick this year. Jets don't have that, or the idea of like a conditional third of some sort next year, where if he plays in a certain level, it bumps up to a second. Like, are you willing to pay that for a guy in the last year of his contract who has not proven anything? Yeah. I don't think that I would be personally. Like, the Bears have been going out of their way to say, well, Tyson Bagent, he's a starting quarterback, and we're getting a lot of calls on him. I think they're asking for a lot for Tyson Bagent, and how can you invest in that kind of player as like your quarterback unless you have some real reason to believe that he's going to be an absolute stud? Mac Jones at least is more provable. Like, you could defend trading for Mac Jones, but like, it's going to be expensive. Like, he's on a really small contract, like $3 million. The 49ers have made it clear they do not want to get rid of him, and so it's not going to just take a second-round pick. It's going to take a second-round pick and more to get Mac Jones, who we haven't seen really succeed outside of Kyle Shanahan's offense. And so, like, none of the options are ideal. That's why I think people are having a hard time predicting what the Jets are going to do, because there's all these different routes where, like, you could swing for a guy like that, and if it's really bad, then, you're going to be right back where you were next year, or you're going to be, a fired head coach. Or you have like middle of the road guys who are perfectly fine but are not going to lead you any wins, like a Jacoby Brissett, like a Kirk Cousins, who again I do not think is going to be a Jet. From both sides, I don't think they want that, and so there's not a lot out there to get really excited about right now in terms of who's actually available. And that's what Tanner McKee. If Tanner McKee only cost you, let's say, a conditional third that could turn into a fourth if he doesn't play enough or play well enough, I'd be down with that. But I'm not trading a second-round pick for Tanner McKee. I'm sorry. Like, I haven't seen anything to say that he should be that because he played really well in the preseason for the Eagles. Like, it feels like if the Eagles get a second-round pick for him, it's going to feel like when they traded A.J. Feely way back in the day for the second-round pick for the Dolphins, right? Because A.J. Feely came in for like 3 games at the end of a season when McNabb was hurt, and it was the Dolphins, and then they got a second-round pick out of him, and it was a disaster. And the Jets need to be hoarding as many of their assets as they can. So that's why even a Kyler, to circle back to that real quick, he's ideal if he's released because you're not giving up any draft assets for him, and it's not going to cost you a lot financially because he doesn't need the money, frankly, because the Cardinals are going to be paying him a lot of money to leave. So, like, somebody like him makes more sense in theory as a stopgap, or if not, somebody that could, in theory, be more than that. I don't think he will be, but that's why, like, I kind of go more in that line of thinking where you're not giving up any draft picks and you're also getting a starting caliber quarterback, whereas you have to give up a second-round pick plus more to get Mac Jones. And so it's a really hard conversation that Muji and Glenn need to be having. If they're all in on the idea of Mac Jones and think, like, I mean, if he's good enough, he could be our quarterback next year, then yeah, absolutely go and trade a second-round pick and a fourth-round pick or whatever it is. But if you don't believe that, then the Jets have way too many needs to trade second-round picks. So
yeah. Kevin Cobb was the other Eagles quarterback that went to the Cardinals. That was
Good
the Cardinals.
Cardinals, yeah. Yeah.
Kevin, I was like, no, there was definitely
the Eagles are the kings of that.
Cardinals.
The Eagles have always been the kings of making a quarterback look just good enough to get an asset for him. And I don't even know that McKee has necessarily gotten that, like, shown enough to do that.
Yeah.
Frankly, so
that was the year. I remember that Kevin Cobb year was wild because Donovan got hurt, and then he ended up coming back for the playoffs, if I'm not mistaken. And it was like, oh my God, Donovan McNabb, like, he's out for the year. I think he hurt his ankle, didn't he? And then he ended up coming back. But then they went all the way to the. Was that the year the Bucs won the Super Bowl? I think that might have been the year that Rondé had the pick 6 against McNabb. I think that might have been that year, 2002. We'll see. There were a lot of years there in a row where the Eagles went to the NFC Championship game and then just lost. I'm with you, man. You can't trade assets for a quarterback. It's not, if you're talking about a 5, okay, but these guys, like, the same reason that a Jet fan would want a McKee or a Jet fan would want any of these other Mac Jones that's available is the same reason why these teams aren't going to give them away for a 5th-round pick, because they know that. And is the 5th-round pick that the Jets would get back worth, if something happens to Brock Purdy, the 49ers know, we'll be okay by turning to Mac. Or if something happens to Jalen Hurts, the Eagles, who have Super Bowl aspirations, will go, no, we think we still got a chance here with Tanner. They're not going to trade away a valuable asset for some 5th-round pick just because they're a backup quarterback. They're going to hold on to those guys and wait until they're free agents, and then they'll let them walk, and they'll get a comp pick when those guys get crazy contracts in free agency. Last thing today, Zach, and I know you actually talked about this in one of your articles, is that Frank Reich and his offense, because we've seen many things. We've seen the way that it looked in Philadelphia. We saw the way that it looked in Indianapolis, and then we saw when it really didn't look all that great in Carolina. You had actually some reporting on what Frank might look like here with the Jets. Am I right?
Yeah, from what I understand, he's building his offense around what he was trying to build it in Carolina. I don't know like the specifics of like what that scheme will look like, but I think when people see that, they might be like, well, he was fired after 11 games. What I would say to that is that's absolutely true, and Bryce Young looked terrible. But it was like an absolute mess that year in Carolina. There was like stuff about, certain coaches and the GM were like, going to the owner and telling him that, they need to coach Bryce Young this way. And so then the owner would go to Frank Reich and be like, you need to do this. Like that's like not a really successful or positive way to live. And so I think he's building what he wanted to do there here. I know that part of the process has been like offensive coaches like pitching ideas to him, and then if he likes them, he'll put them in the playbook, and so it's a real collaborative process ultimately. But this is going to be Frank Reich's show, his baby. He's not going to have. He had play calling. He like gave up play calling that year, and then he took it back. It was like a whole mess. He's going to be the play caller the entire season this year. It's fair to be concerned hearing the words Panthers in 2021, but or 2023, sorry, but that's what they're doing, and I have heard positive things about Seth Ryan and his creativity, and talked to a couple Lions sources who were like they really did get a stud. Like he's somebody who helped Ben Johnson with like trick plays and things like that. So you hope that the combination of like a young coach and an older coach like Frank Reich, you meet somewhere in the middle and have a creative offense.
Going into the NFL Combine, Zach, you thought that the Jets pick at number 2 was going to be who?
Arvell Reese.
And do you feel any differently leaving?
I don't, but I would say like I don't think they'll pick this guy, but like he's really like flown up boards as Sonny Styles, the linebacker, also in that Ohio State defense. Like that dude.
I think he's gonna be a Giants pick. Yeah.
Yeah. If not, I mean, between Caleb Downs, Sonny Styles, and Arvell Reese, like just three freaks, like three like kind of positionless guys. All you can make an argument would, immediately be a star for the Jets defense. I think ultimately it'll still be Arvell Reese, but like I'm highly intrigued by all three of those guys, and it's gonna be one of those things we look back on and like it's insane that all three of these guys are on the same defense because all three of them are just freaks and studs.
But the only one that I'd steer away from is I don't know if I'd go the Downs route. I'm still like I love a safety when he's taking 10.
Yeah.
I love
can't
a safety
do it at
when he's
2,
taking
yeah.
12. You can't do it at 2, man. And I understand like that whole conversation that we've had about positional value and things like that. The reason why we're having that conversation regarding guys like Sonny and maybe not so much Sonny, but regarding guys like Jeremiah Love and Caleb Downs and stuff like that, is because there's no quarterbacks in this year's class. If there were 2 other quarterbacks worthy of a top 10 pick, they're going in the top 10, and that's pushing those guys down to more reasonable selections. Same if there was a no doubt bona fide lockdown corner. That person's going to get drafted earlier. If there was a true stud wide receiver, that person's going to get drafted earlier. Carnell Tate might be very good. Same with Lemon and any of these other guys that are in the draft, but like they're not considered a Jamar Chase prospect or a Malik Neighbors prospect or a Marvin Harrison prospect or any of the corners that have come out recently and gone super, super high. So that's why you see players like Downs and Love and Sonny being considered earlier possible selections. It's because there's no one necessarily to push them down to where their positions are more routinely selected. But this was a fun episode, dude. I appreciated you. Yeah. I'm glad you got home safe. I'm glad you had some fun. And we're doing this show every week, so I know we're going to talk next week, and we will have plenty more to discuss. Anything you want to add here before we...
I would say we have to discuss as a podcast, but I would guess we're gonna have more than one pod next week because free agency is next week, and this is
that is right. I keep forgetting, dude. I keep forgetting. It
comes quicker than you realize. Yeah. So next Monday is when the negotiating window opens, and magically a bunch of guys are gonna sign with the new teams right when the window opens, and it's always amazing how they're able to negotiate a full contract in 30 seconds. But
that's always Sorry, you go, Zach. My bad.
No, I was gonna say this. It's free agency is a lot of fun, other than the time I decided to take a weed gummy, go to bed at 9 p.m. and turn my phone on Do Not Disturb, and I wake up in the middle of the night to alerts that Tyrod Taylor and John Simpson and somebody else had signed, and the Jets fan just absolutely roasted me for like an entire week. And I will not be making that. My wife likes me to go to bed at the same time as her. I'll be sticking it out and trying to be an adult and stay up later.
You're gonna stay up past 9 o'clock.
I am. I know you get madder than anybody because you'll text me at 9:45 and my phone's already on Do Not Disturb, and in the morning you'd be like, oh, you POS. Answer me.
So my daughter stays up later than you. Like, my daughter pretty much goes to bed like 8:30, 9 o'clock. And then, like, I put her to bed. And that's usually when, if I have to write, a story for SNY, or if I have some sourcing that I have to do, if I've got to get my ducks in a row because I'm working on something, I get my daughter to sleep, then I go in my office and I take care of it. Like, I'll get a soda, I'll come up here, I'll take care of my work in my office, and especially when Bree goes to bed too. So, like, that's my like, everyone's asleep. And usually when that starts happening, like, when I'm working, things will pop in my brain, or like, I'll even think about the show or a segment, and I'll be like, oh, I got to hit up Zach. And I hit send on my text message. And then immediately I'm like, I'm not going to hear from this mother effer until tomorrow morning. I'm not going to get to sleep. So it is, dude. Free agency, for fans that don't know, like, that, my wife even knows. Like, she's a nurse, so she can schedule her own times. Those 3 days of the legal tampering period, she makes sure she's off every single week, because you're making phone calls, you're sending text messages, you're chasing tidbits, you're reacting to news that breaks. It is just such craziness, but it's also, like, some of the most fun. Like, it's one of those,
it's when we thrive as Jets writers. This is our Super Bowl. The free agency week is that's how we live,
This is our Super Bowl. So we will be back with you guys next week for the legal tampering period. Definitely a handful of shows are going to be coming your way, or a few shows, I should say, about what the Jets do, reacting to live moves. We'll have your complete and total coverage. So make sure that you stay tuned to The Athletic, where you can find Zach, SNY.TV, where you can find me, and here on YouTube, SNY's YouTube channel, where you can get every piece of SNY's digital content. The Mets and Yankees are back for spring training. The Knicks are in full swing trying to make a playoff push, and free agency is coming up for the Jets, and we are going to have you covered, so make sure you stay tuned there. As for Zach, or for Zach, I should say, I am Connor Hughes, and a huge thank you to our production team of Sam Candle, Corey Palmer, and executive producer Jeff Goldman. This has been Jets Final Drive. And yeah, Super Bowl next week with free agency. We'll see you guys then.